why did I want to join the Eels network? And, I thought about that. And, it comes down to, well, a couple of things, right? And number one, your passion for it, right, comes out. It came out to me. And if the owner, founder, leader is not passionate about the business and the mission and what they're trying to do, it never works. Never works. So, check. Got that. Jose's passionate about it. He's going to make this thing, and he's a hard worker, right? He's got a great work ethic. Those two things, you're going to figure this out. Got it. And then the other part I liked about your model is you want to help professionals at all levels in their career, whether they're just starting out, whether they're a manager, senior manager, director, VP, all the way to C-suite, right? The thing I like about that is it allows your network to forge long-term relationships with a person. There are companies that will segment. We're only going to cater to this type of group. Yeah. Well, what happened on the way up? Like, how do you know? You're trying to reconstruct everything. Well, if you're with them all the way through this, right? And even if you're handing off from one coach to another in the network, that's fine because you're talking, right? And you're figuring, and you have this intimate relationship, right? That's going to benefit your client. They're going to figure that out, and they're going to stay with Eels for the long term. So I just thought your approach to right through the entire career cycle, right through the entire career journey, I thought that was a great piece or a great part of your strategy of this business. So, yeah.
No, and I appreciate that, and I think it's necessary today. I think it's necessary. You've mentioned for you the impact mentors have had on your journey.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed from my experiences, military, corporate, small business, not everyone has an opportunity to find or get that mentor, or what I'm defining as a good example of what good looks like. So I'd be curious, with you mentioning the mentors that you've had, what kind of impact have they had on your journey? We've talked about what it is Eels is. We've talked about being a professional sounding board at all levels. Is that how you have viewed your mentors throughout your journey? Have they been a sounding board for you? Have they been a guide? How have those mentors impacted you throughout your career?
Yeah. It's always helpful when you have an example of what to do and, quite honestly, what not to do, right? It's, the mentors that came into my career or came to me during my career wasn't planned. It wasn't like, oh, I want to go and be under that person because no, they took it upon themselves because they saw something in me that they felt was worth spending their time. Bringing me in on meetings that I really wasn't needed in the meeting. I wasn't contributing. They allowed me to absorb and see interactions with different teams and different topics. They became a sounding board because because I knew I could trust them to talk about stuff that I couldn't talk about with other people. But the funny part about it is when they're mentoring you, you don't think of them as mentoring you. Yeah. It's down the road where something happens, something's come up that you're dealing with, and somehow you draw on the experiences, the interaction with that person somewhere in your career. And you're like, oh, you know what? That person would have done it this way. And I've seen them do it this way, and it worked out. And here's what happens if you don't do it this way. And you draw this experience in to your decision-making today. Yeah. But back then, when it was happening real time, you're not sitting there going, oh, I gotta catalog this. Let me mark this down. Let me write this. No, you're absorbing it, and then it comes back. And so, when I think about coaching, mentoring, guiding folks, being a sounding board for people, I'm trying to teach them, hey, what's going on at this moment? It was like when I was raising my kids, right? Like kids, when you're raising them, they don't listen. It looks like they don't listen, right? You're pounding away.
I mean, all too well.
Eat over your plate, eat over your plate, eat over your plate, eat over. I don't think I've said those words more, right? Or any other words more than those. And they didn't. All of a sudden, fast forward 10 or 15 years, and you're out, and they're adults, and they're growing up, and they're adults and everything. All of a sudden, they're eating over their plate. It sticks, and it comes out at the appropriate time.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like when you're talking to employees, and you're giving them, you're showing them, you're telling them things, you're working with them, you're counseling them, you're using it as a soundboard. That stuff just kind of plants in their head, and then it comes out at the right time later on. And so you don't always see the results right away. You have to know and trust. Oh no, down the road, when I'm not around, and we may not even be in connection anymore, right? In communication anymore, something good is happening, right? There's actually something really cool about that you're creating things for down the road, or helping people create things.
I'd absolutely agree, and I'd be curious. Let's talk about intent a little bit, right? Because if we look at your journey, manufacturing, you're an engineer by trade, manufacturing, product lines, R&D, marketing, VP, GM, CEO. How intentional has your journey been as you've jumped from role to role? Because you said something there, speaking to the mentor, maybe at the time, it wasn't your intention to add it to your toolbox, but it stuck. As you think about all those conversations, all those experiences, which by the way, that's how I view everything I'm doing. I don't care what meeting I'm walking into. That is another opportunity for me to listen, to watch, and to learn. How intentional would you say that your journey and your jumps have been as you've done as much as you've done?
It's funny because I came from, I'm first generation. I came from very blue collar roots. My parents worked 6-7 days a week just to, make sure that my sister and I had a better future than, you always try to improve the next generation, right? There was no guidance for a professional white-collar career. You're going to college, you're going to get a degree in something we understand. Engineering was in that category. And then once that happened, I was pretty much on my own. Like I didn't have a plan, I didn't have a roadmap. Now, fast forward, 25, 30 years, I've been able to provide that kind of guidance and advice and counsel to my own kids who are entered into the professional world. But I didn't. I went to work as an engineer. I started in the safety products industry, designing personal protective equipment. And I didn't even know that was a thing, really. Yeah. Answered an ad to a job, got the job, started designing stuff. I had to learn all of that stuff because they don't teach you that in engineering school. And then I told you about my first mentor, the general manager of that business, took me under his wing. And after watching him and listening and this and that, I said to myself, maybe I was like a year and a half in, I said, I want to do what he's doing. I want to run a business and take care of these people like he does. That's what I said. I'm 22 maybe at the time, 22 and a half. That was it. That was, I'm going to do that. How? What was the exact path to get there? I had no idea. And it isn't like I fumbled my way through. What happened was opportunities came up that sometimes it was uncomfortable, but I said, I got to take it because they've asked me. They may not ask me again. Yeah. So old school, you just go ahead and get it done. Does it benefit me? Does it not in my career? Don't know. But I got to do it. And I did. And every time I went into something new, I tried to redefine it. I tried to better it. I put 110% into it. I never half-assed anything, right? I took it on. Was I world-class at everything I did? No. Did I make mistakes? Yeah, a ton. Sure. But you recover quick from your mistakes, you move on, and you get the job done. But, you know, I took on different challenges. Again, there were people that put me in these challenges, unbeknownst to me, because it was broadening my set of experiences, situations that I had to face. Right? You're not gonna see as many things in a straight line as you are in a zigzag,
Sure.
right? So it wasn't planned, but I was getting used to being comfortable being uncomfortable. I was getting used to meeting with all and leading all kinds of professions, non-exempts, exempts, blue collar, white collar, whatever you want to say, different types of disciplines. You know, so my core was engineering, R&D. You know, I spent lots of time on the plant floor. I spent lots of time with customers. Oh, lo and behold, we all kind of figured out, wow, Nino's not bad with customers. Let's put him out in the field more with the sales folks and help them close deals, because I was able to get that credibility of being an engineer.
Sure.
Well, then that led to, well, some of the marketing guys want you to kind of give them more guidance on the product development agenda and roadmap. Okay, well, let's do that. And then, you know, I was able to get an expat assignment over in Europe. Well, that opened my eyes to the global business.
Yeah.
And having to deal with, you know, living in someone else's world and having to adapt to them and yet still get my job done. I mean, that, you know, 3.5 years of that accelerates you 10 years. I took it on. Hey, young family, I'm going abroad. That's not easy to do. Let's try it. You know, I embraced challenges that were thrown my way. I got comfortable being uncomfortable. I just didn't do the same thing, and as a result, my experiences grew, my skill set grew. You know what actually grew more? I was always curious by nature. My curiosity actually grew more, because it's just like, oh man, I learned that segment. Why can't I learn that segment? And why can't I? So now it wasn't planned at all. But if you're willing to embrace challenges and you're willing to try different things and risk failure, ask a lot of questions, whatever. If you're willing to do that, put yourself out there, I think, just like in your personal life, I think your professional life can flourish much more than you ever realized or thought of. And it doesn't have to be planned, you know?
I would agree with it all. I would say I'm a big movie and metaphor guy. So, you know, I think of my run in corporate. So I had 5 roles, 10 years, all different parts of the business. And the way I always explained it is, I'm carrying a baton for the time that I have this role. It is my job, my duty, my responsibility to make things better. Make things better. And, you know, I was very proud, at least from my lens, every business unit that I had, that I was a part of, that I led, did become better. It's the best feeling to be able to turn that over. Here you go. Now look what we've got.
Yep.
I'm also a big believer.
And by the way, just to interrupt you for a second, and along the way, you getting those results with a team, you've created others that are now getting results because they were part of this success.
It becomes contagious.
It
becomes contagious to see it.
Absolutely it does. Because, again, you know what good looks like. You're developing these good skills, these winning skills, these winning experiences. They just pile up, and you just get better and better and better, which is why I said earlier, go try everything. You know?
And then I'd also say the other metaphor is doors forming. You know, I've been very intentional in my career. I've wanted to check certain boxes that I knew organizations wanted, that I also needed, but it's also been hey, look, I don't want to know everything about everything. Like, I think of some roles, door formed, I decided to walk through it, knowing, you know, a little bit about the role and what it could do. But if I would have done, let's say, 90+% research of what this role entailed and everything, I wouldn't have wanted to do it, because I would have identified things like, no, I don't want to do that. Sometimes that door forms, you just have to walk through it and see where it takes you. Now, I think, you know, a pretty heavy question for you, if you don't mind. You're describing your journey that's gotten you to the top, right? And it's now 2025, and I would tell you, Nino, I think a lot of people right now who are getting started in their career may not agree with you anymore. And they may say, that's not possible anymore. I mean, turn on the news and look at everything that's going on. What do you think of those young professionals starting in 2025? Think about that plant floor that you described, young Nino, and finding that mentor and being optimistic, which I believe you are, being forward thinking. Do you think that young professionals today have those opportunities to have a fulfilling career, to climb organizations and accomplish a lot that we've had opportunities to do throughout our journeys?
Absolutely. 100%. I don't even hesitate saying that, right? Again, I'll refer back to my older daughter, right? She's 28 years old. She's a professional accountant. I look at what she's done in her first, 5, now going on 6 years, and the things that she's experiencing. Now, why is she, experiencing so many things? She has an amazing work ethic. She's not afraid to try stuff. When she is occasionally, she'll come to me. We'll talk through it, and I'm like, it's the worst that could happen. Come on, just try it. Ask a lot of questions. She has benefited from mentors in her career. Why? Because people still recognize that they got to nurture their staffs and to make results of the business. That's not stopping. And there's just this natural tendency to want to take someone who is really trying, really smart, just needs guidance and experience, right? I think there's a natural tendency for, and not everybody has this tendency, but I think there's a lot of people out there that do have this tendency that they want to go and help. They want to mentor. They're not calling it mentoring. They're not trying to put a label on it and take credit. They just do it. And I think that there's still plenty of people out there that will do that. There are still plenty of people out there with a work ethic. By the way, I come back to that. You got to work hard. That's the fundamental. And then you got to try. Don't be afraid. So no, I think 100% that if you are willing to work hard, if you're able to work hard, if you want to, and you're willing to try different things, whether it's starting your own business, whether it's going into a corporate setting for the first time, right, and kind of working your way through there, or joining a family-owned business, right, with the different dynamics. I don't really care. I think there's opportunities out there to do whatever and test yourself and to really and kind of expand your horizons. Yeah, I still do.
I would completely agree. I think aside from the work ethic, I'll go back to optimism as well. I walk into environments, I don't care how poor they are, glass half full, looking for the silver lining and the positive. I think you have to. And, I think this day and age with the information blitz that we get, it's very easy to be consumed by negative headlines and everything that's happening in the world and think it's doom and gloom. But what's interesting is, and I was just talking to my barber about this. So my barber's storefront is at a mall. And I think if you believe the headlines of doom and gloom, you think one thing. Well, guess what? When I go to the mall, I can barely find a parking spot.
Yeah.
And I see consumers with bags everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes get out of the house, get a glimpse of reality of what's happening out there. And I think it can have a significant impact on anyone who's feeling stuck, anyone who sees, I don't care if it's RTO, organizational changes. Look, those have been happening the last 25 years, and they're going to happen the next 25 years. It's evolution. It's going to happen, but that doesn't mean it needs to change your view of life and the world and business and opportunity. No, I think for those who are hungry and go-getters and are willing to put in the work, there's going to be doors forming, and if you walk through them, that's a choice that you'll have to make, and it could have a significant impact for you.
You talk. I agree. You talk about the headlines and the negativity of it all. You got to self-regulate how much information you take in and what kind of information you take in. If you're in the business world, I don't care if you're an entrepreneur or you work in corporate, you work in private equity, it doesn't matter. You have to understand economically what's happening around you, right? You have to understand the dynamics, the levers of policy, or of sentiment. But that's your base. You should understand. You got to understand geopolitical activities and what's going on, because that's going to affect economies. But there's a lot of other news, negative, and it just seems, and I don't know if it's just me getting older or not, but there just seems to be more and more negativity versus positive news, or negative news versus positive.
Yeah, I agree.
You got to filter it out. Stop listening. Go do something else, right? Go, I don't know, go make something with wood in your garage, or go read a book, of a genre that you like and brings you pleasure, and it breaks the monotony of your life. Just don't take it in anymore. Shut it off. It's a 24/7 news cycle, right? They got to fill it up. Unfortunately, they fill it up with a lot of negative. By the way, they also fill it up with a lot of stuff that isn't true.
Yeah. You
find out later. Well, yeah, we took this bid, and stop listening. Turn it off. Go do something else. Go take a walk. Clear your head. So I think you have to self-regulate, or you can be dragged down into a negative kind of energy, right? A negative kind of thinking. I don't allow myself to do that. I can actually feel myself sometimes, like starting to, and I'm always glass half full, right? Once I start to see that glass going a little less than half, I shut it off. I stay with the business news, stay with the economy, and again, you got to filter some of that stuff out too, right? Because even some of that stuff now is just filled with stuff that just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Go back to what we said earlier. You got to be able to think for yourself. Yeah, you got to be able to filter stuff out. Don't take everything at face value. So I think you have to self-regulate, or the stuff you take in, or you can be dragged down. And you're a normally optimistic person like yourself can all of a sudden become very negative. That's not good. Don't let those external things affect you. I would say that to anybody.
I think the other classic line that I always default to is impact what you can control. And if you're reading a news headline of something happening in DC no, you've got no control over this.
Yeah.
What you've got control over is how you show up that day, the culture that you impact by either helping or not, and how you carry yourself with those around you. It makes a difference.
Yeah.
Especially with the environments that we've talked about you being in, right? From big corporate, small business, medium, family owned. The smaller those environments get, the smaller the head count, the more that every single personality makes an impact from the top to bottom, right? I just spoke about this in some content this week, and being a leader, and it is just amazing how much one person has the ability to impact someone's life. And I reflect on that, thinking, how often do we get that opportunity? You've mentioned kids as parents, right? As parents, we can make or break our kids' day. You start kind of peeling the onion outside of that. When do you really get to affect someone as emotionally as a child? And it could be getting into the workplace. Being a leader that, let's say imagine being a leader that someone absolutely loves, would run through walls for, versus the one that, God, I got to come into work today. You get those Sunday night scaries when the phone rings. It's like, that IM comes through. I think about everything that's happening and the impact when you're at the top. And the top doesn't necessarily, it could be within your own space, right? It could be you leading the team of 10. It could be you leading the organization. But to help filter out that noise, what an opportunity that you have when you're in leadership. And I'm going to guess, given the way you've described leading throughout your career, I have no doubt that's an approach that you've taken, whether it be from the plant floor to the corporate office, the ability to positively impact the people that are looking for that guidance, for just anything within your space that you have the ability to impact.
You mentioned the term, would you call it Sunday scaries?
The Sunday scaries.
You mentioned that term, and you said it in the context of, you were talking about a leader's got to be, they have to set the example for the energy level, right? The Absolutely. Attitude, it's the tone and tenor. And you mentioned that term. I had heard that term for the first time maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And I said, when is that Sunday scary? So this is the second time I heard it, right? And, well, that feeling, that anxious feeling, that anxiety that you get, it starts kind of like Saturday night, Sunday morning, because you got to go to work on Monday. And I said, wow, I can honestly say, in over 3 decades of going to work every day, hardly taking a sick day, I've never experienced the Sunday scaries. 6 o'clock rolled around on Monday morning, raring to go, let's go. You know, shave, get dressed, go out the door, get to work, put your head down. And I never had that, and you know, we started talking about it, and I said, maybe you need to find another line of work. Maybe you need to find another position or something else to do. I said, because that's a tough way to live, you know. But back to leadership, if I'm assuming you get those scaries, that anxiety is going to show somehow, right? That you know, that negativity somewhere deep down. And suddenly, your issues become the employee's issues, right? Your team's issues, and that's not good. I mean, you should aspire to bring positive energy. You should aspire to bring enthusiasm to the workplace. You know, your problems becoming their problems brings them down. Well, why would you do that to somebody, right? Like, just don't be a leader. Go do something else. I mean, just don't affect these people in a negative way. You're there to inspire. You're there to motivate. You're there to teach, to get some wins and let them feel even better about it and learn and grow. And, you know, bringing a bad attitude to work as a leader, don't be a leader. Just go do something else. You know, go be an individual contributor somewhere else and doing something else. But personally, you should find something you like to do. You know, but yeah, I'd never heard that term before. It's the second time, but 35 years in, I've never had it. I always just managed to find something to do that I liked.
You know, when I'm talking career, you mentioned the leader versus individual contributor. I consider that a pretty big fork in the road in a professional journey, and I don't think there's a right answer, right? Like, I think sometimes people think I have to be a leader in order to have a successful career. No. And I don't agree with that either. I think there are many individual contributor jobs out there that can be fulfilling.
Oh, yeah.
The earnings are there.
Yeah.
But 100%, you know, you know, we talked about doors forming and you walking through them. If you reach that crossroads, and let's say you dive into the deep end, you start leading a team, first-time manager, first-time leader, and you realize it's not for you, it's okay to pivot. It's okay to, you know, even if it may not be for you, why don't you absorb the experience, like do the best you can, and talk to your leadership or devise your plan.
Ask for help.
Ask for help, raise your hand.
Ask for help.
Okay, great call out.
Make a go of this, right?
You know, and then make a pivot into something. But you know, I think for those who are in really tough leadership spots, like, something has to be done about it, because it's more than just you. You know, any leadership conversation that I have with anybody, that's the emphasis there. It has stopped being about you. It has stopped. It's no longer about what's going on, the pressures from above, the pressures from below. You can have a team of, I don't care, 2, 4, 5, 6, it doesn't matter. They are looking at you, they're relying on you, and it's a burden of leadership. It is truly a burden, and it's not for everyone, and that's okay. But I think it can be some of the most incredible, fulfilling emotions. You know, we've talked about our journeys, and you know, I've told you a few times now what I've considered the most successful parts of doing this, impacting others and watching their growth and the impact it had on their lives. But this isn't for everyone, and that's okay. But it truly is. It can truly be a burden at times when it comes to, you know, being over others.
Yeah. No, you said there's no harm and shame in going backwards. No. You know, going back to being if it's not for you, it's not for you. Like I said, give it a go. Ask for help. You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are thrown into manager roles, and this is a shame, really. There's a lot of people that are thrown into manager roles, supervision roles, without any type of training, without any type of onboarding, whatever you want to call it. Here, I got some good news for you. You're going to be managing these 3 people. Oh, okay. No. Well, is there any type of training or this? Well, no, not really. I mean, you'll learn. Just get in there and just do it. Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes it comes naturally to some people, and they figure it out and they, you know, get it done. But for others, it's just not their cup of tea. And it's okay to go back at some point and go, yeah, I'm good with individual contributor, because guess what? Companies don't move ahead. Companies don't prosper on the backs of just management. It's the individual contributors. They're the ones doing all the work. So if you're really good and really passionate about whatever it is you're doing, you can absolutely contribute mightily as an individual contributor to a company. No doubt about it.
I would absolutely agree. And you said
It's
something.
not for everybody.
You said about being put in that leadership position for the first time. What I've seen a few times throughout my journey is a team member who's really good at their job now gets the bump to lead the team. And that order is given, take what you're doing and now take it to the team. And it doesn't work that way, right?
Nope.
It's a completely different set of skills.
It is.
So let's compound that by you put someone in that situation with not much training or experience leading, and now let's say you're the person overseeing that person and you're getting frustrated now. And now you're a individual contributor. You now consider failing as a leader, not doing what it is you asked them to do, but nothing is being done about it. Okay, let's talk about the burden of leadership when it comes to having the tough conversations. Because I've been in those moments where you step in and you see someone who's not doing the role the way that it should be done, and then you ask, well, has anyone told them? Has anyone taken this person aside and said, hey, these are the expectations, this is what we need out of you? No, we haven't had that. Let's talk about that a little bit in giving feedback and having those tough convos, because I'd be very interested to hear from you throughout your journey. Does it change depending the level you're at? I think of you being on the, let's say, plant floor versus CEO. And let's say you're giving feedback to someone in your own C-suite versus now, let's say you're not at that C-level, but you're giving feedback. Does it change how your accountability and standard? Does it change how you communicate that, how you approach it? Or I know I've said a mouthful there, but hopefully you get the gist of what I'm getting at.
No, so number one, it never gets easy. And I don't care what level what level in the organization you are providing that kind of feedback to somebody. It's always a very difficult conversation. However, the first thing I think about, whether it's my manager having to give that conversation or me, did you do everything you could as a manager to help that person succeed? Did they take that feedback and constructively, positively, and try to use it? Did you put somebody in that role that really wasn't meant for that role, wasn't really geared up for that role, didn't really want that role? Did you force a square peg in a round hole? Because that's your responsibility as a manager. That's kind of on you. But if you've coached, if you've advised, if you've given feedback, and that person just refuses to try to execute differently and improve, that conversation isn't actually as hard as you think, as some people think it is. They know it.
Agreed.
They know it. And nobody wants to fail every day. Nobody wants to struggle every day. And sometimes you have to have that tough conversation to let them free of this burden that maybe they put on themselves. Maybe you help do it and you try to rectify it and it just didn't work out. But, I've always found that I'm going to say every one of them, but 98% of the tough conversations that I've had to have, and there's been a lot of them, everybody knows it's coming. Yeah. Both parties know. There's this, in some companies, there's a very formal performance review process. And I used to tell my managers, and I used to do this myself, I used to say this to myself, if you're having a tough annual review with someone, and this is coming out for the first time, and they're hearing it for the first time, you failed as a manager. I'm holding you accountable. Yeah. Because all through the year, there should be ongoing feedback. Doesn't have to be formal. It can be informal. If there's serious issues, document it. But in a way that coaches and guides. Yeah. It's not a condemnation. It's not an HR form. Yeah. But through the year, you should be helping people succeed. Your goal is to help people succeed. If they're failing at the end, is it on you? Is it on them? But it's not really, it's almost a relief at some point. They walk away angry and hurt and everything else. Yeah, but a day or two later, wow, you know what? At least I don't have to to go and do this job anymore because I didn't like it. I wasn't really doing well. So I think first and foremost, it's incumbent upon a manager to make sure that the right person is put in the job. Second of all, you got to spend time. You got to coach. You got to guide. If you see somebody struggling, don't look the other way. Yes, it takes more time. Yes, it's a harder, it extends your day, but that's your job. You're a leader. You're a manager. You got to be nurturing. You got to be developing people, and you got to make sure that you're heading off any possibility of a tough conversation. But if it's required, you get it done because it actually benefits not just the company, but it actually does benefit that person. Yeah.
We've done some work on mid-year reviews, and we said the very same thing. You know, you cannot blindside a team member during that mid-year review. Yeah. That is not the time to say 3 months ago I saw this, and 2 months ago this happened, and last month this. No. That feedback needs to be continuous throughout the half, throughout the year. Yeah. Hopefully during scheduled one-on-ones or some sort of training, some access that you give to your team members. But no, if you step in and for the first time you're telling a team member in that formal environment what it is that they're doing wrong, you absolutely need to pivot.
No, you failed as a manager. You should be held accountable.
A bold way to put it, 100%.